I don't know why I agreed to do it. Maybe it was stubborn pride, or maybe it was the part of me that refuses to let fear dictate my decisions. But when my friends dared me to spend one night inside the abandoned hospital on the edge of town, I didn't back down. I'd driven past it countless times, the decaying shell looming against the horizon, its windows boarded up or shattered, the walls discolored with decades of weather and neglect. Everyone in town had their own version of the story about why it shut down, something about malpractice, unexplained patient deaths, a fire that damaged the upper floors. But no one ever gave the same account twice. What was consistent, though, was the warning. People who went inside never stayed long, and those who claimed they did said they heard things. Metal dragging across tile, voices whispering their names, the sounds of footsteps just out of sight. The hospital greeted me with silence when I pushed the rusted side door open and slipped in. My flashlight beam shook slightly in my hand as I swept it across the reception area. Paint peeled from the walls in long curling strips, ceiling tiles sagged and gaped like missing teeth, and a smell of mold, damp plaster, and something faintly metallic lingered in the air. I had expected coldness, but the heat was stifling, heavy, pressing on my chest with every breath. Dust swirled through the beam of my light, thick enough to make me cough. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, the soles of my boots crunching against broken glass scattered across the floor. I told myself it was just a building, just brick and wood and old wiring. But there was something about the way the shadows seemed to move just a little slower than my light that put me on edge. My goal was simple. Walk through the halls, take a few pictures, make it out before dawn. The others would never let me live it down if I chickened out early. The first noise I heard wasn't anything spectacular, just a faint creak above me, like the groan of wood under weight. I told myself it was a pigeon, or maybe the wind shifting the roof. But the sound came again, steady, deliberate, like someone pacing along the second floor directly above me. I froze in the middle of the hallway, my light pointed toward the ceiling, my ears straining. The sound stopped at the moment I did. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, pressing against me until the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I shook it off, muttered something under my breath about nerves, and moved deeper into the hospital. The hallways all looked the same. Long stretches of cracked tile, doors hanging crooked on their hinges, faded signs pointing toward wards and operating rooms. I passed a collapsed gurney, its wheels bent inward, a thin film of rust coating its metal frame. My flashlight caught something scrawled across the wall in faded red paint. "Leave while you can." I laughed nervously, though the sound echoed too loudly in the empty space and died out quickly. Probably teenagers, I told myself. Kids came in here, spray-painted walls, made up ghost stories. That was all it was. I decided to head toward the old surgical wing. My boots squeaked faintly against the tile, and the closer I got, the more the air seemed to thicken. It smelled sharper here, like antiseptic long gone sour, and the temperature dropped enough that I could see my breath puff out in front of me. That was impossible. It was the middle of summer. I rubbed my arms and pressed on. That was when I heard it. A dragging sound, faint but unmistakable, like metal scraping slowly across tile. My stomach clenched. The sound was ahead of me, just around the corner, and I swear I felt the vibration of it in the floor beneath my feet. I stood frozen in the hall, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but instead I forced my legs forward, one step, then another, until I was close enough to peer around the corner. The hallway was empty. My light washed over cracked tiles and peeling paint, but nothing moved. The sound had stopped. I stood there, my pulse hammering in my ears, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. When the dragging started again, but this time behind me. I spun around, light jerking wildly. But the hall behind me was just as empty as the one ahead. My chest heaved with shallow breaths. I told myself it was an echo, the building's acoustics playing tricks. But the sound came again. Closer, and this time, it wasn't just dragging. It was footsteps. Slow, measured, heavy footsteps. Moving toward me down the hall. I bolted forward without thinking, my light bouncing against the walls as I sprinted toward the surgical wing. I threw myself through the swinging double doors, their rusted hinges screaming, and slammed them shut behind me. My flashlight beam flickered, sputtered, and I smacked it against my palm until it steadied again. The surgical wing was worse than the rest of the hospital. The walls here were tiled in white, though most of the tiles were cracked or stained, and faded outlines on the floor marked where operating tables once stood. Old surgical lights hung like broken insect eyes from the ceiling, their glass cracked, their arms rusting. I swallowed hard as I forced myself to keep moving. That's when I heard the whisper. Soft at first, so faint I thought it was the blood rushing in my ears. But then it grew clearer. My name. My name whispered in a voice that was not mine, not male, not female, but something in between, echoing low and drawn out. Come closer. My throat went dry. My hands shook so violently the light beam jittered against the walls. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Not until I saw something at the far end of the hall. A shadow, darker than the rest, standing perfectly still, even as my flashlight swept across it. It had no features, just the outline of a person, tall, unmoving. My breath caught. I stumbled backward, my boots squeaking against the tile, and that's when every door along the hallway slammed shut in unison. The sound thundered through the corridor, and I dropped my flashlight in shock. The beam rolled wildly across the walls, landed on the shadow again, but now it was closer. Too close. I grabbed the light and ran, not caring where, just away. I tore through the halls, past collapsed ceilings and rusted bed frames, until I found a stairwell. I didn't stop to think, just pounded down the steps into the basement. The air grew colder, damper, filled with the stink of mildew and something foul, like rotting meat. The basement was worse than anything above. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping water in slow, steady rhythms, and the walls were coated in black mold. My flashlight beam caught movement, rats scattering across the floor, their squeals sharp and shrill. I stumbled into what must have once been the morgue. The metal drawers still lined the walls, most rusted shut, but a few gaped open like empty mouths. The dragging sound returned, louder now, right behind me, scraping across the concrete floor. I spun, my light shaking, and I saw it. Not a shadow this time, not a trick of the dark. Something stood at the far end of the morgue, tall and gaunt, its limbs too long, its skin hanging in gray tatters. Its head tilted unnaturally, bones cracking with emotion, and its mouth opened in a grin too wide for its face. The sound of metal scraping echoed again, but it wasn't dragging anything. It was its nails, long and rust-colored, raking across the wall as it moved toward me. I backed up, my shoulders hitting one of the open drawers, and the thing's grin widened. It whispered my name again, the same voice I'd heard before. And I realized with a sick drop in my stomach that it wasn't calling me closer. It was promising me I'd never leave. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back up the stairs, don't remember bursting through the halls, don't remember slamming through the side door and stumbling into the night air. What I do remember is the sound following me, echoing in my ears even after I reached my car. The scraping, the footsteps, And that voice, even now, days later when I close my eyes at night, I hear it again, faint, just outside my bedroom door. And I know the hospital didn't let me go. It just followed me home,